What's up? Welcome to my video about builds, or AKA how to build builds. Um, yeah, I've just been noticing a lot of people posting their builds online on Reddit or the Facebook groups, and it seems like a lot of people just don't. I mean, obviously they're asking for advice, they're asking for suggestions, or for people to sort of confirm or critique that they're doing something right with their builds. Uh, and I know that it took me a while to get a firm grasp of what to look for in a build as far as effectively using every available slot and making things synergize, which I didn't have a concept of. I honestly, in the beginning, I just used to go with whatever sounded good, not realizing how things work. And it took it took some time to sort of experiment with what worked, and partially just reading online, finding out about other people's builds and what worked for them. And it was just a very empirical process for me because at the time, well, I've been playing Legends since the beginning, since it's been, yeah, oh, it'll be a month. I mean, it'll be a year and a month. So, yeah, uh, there just wasn't enough, enough information available for us in the beginning. I guess there were some people that came from different games that had gear systems that were similar. This is my first online game that I play, or any sort of game that has gear like this where you can make your builds. I previously, yeah, I just never had any experience with this. But anyway, let's dive into it. So, first, I guess I'm gonna break down what things mean, and then we can go into stacking and synergizing. So first, let's take a look at different things. So I guess you first need to be aware of how damage affects your damage. I mean, how different types of damage affect your overall damage output. And so this one, let's see, melee damage and Oni damage, Stone Master, Way of the Flame. So Oni damage is pretty much, it's great. It's one of the reasons that a lot of people use Oni damage is because it's damage to Oni foes across the board. So melee damage, for example, is very specific. So every time you're using your katana, um, I mean it's pretty redundant to say, but every time you're using melee damage, which is katana close quarters combat, that's where you're going to be getting your damage. So Oni damage could be range damage, could be um, goes weapon damage on top of everything. So melee damage just stacks on top of everything else that you've got going on with your build, which is why it's great. I know a lot of people, including myself in the beginning, love to use that slot for ultimate damage, which is great. It's good, but you just got to be aware of how often you're using your ult and also what type of content you're playing. So if you're going into a lot of nightmare content, you're going to run into a lot of Oni foes, as opposed to gold, where you're not going to be seeing those early on. Um, so for that, you might want more ultimate damage. It really just depends on what you're playing. But yeah, so if you're playing a lot of nightmare content, then you're going to want, or at least I do, want some Oni damage in there. And so we go into Way of the Flame for this particular katana. Way of the Flame is also a status effect damage. So basically, any type of damage that occurs over time is going to be a status effect damage, um, as opposed to just happening and then taking the full amount of damage at that, like a melee hit. Um, so anything that's burning, poisoning, weakening, anything that, or hallucination, anything that just occurs over time is going to be status effect damage. So Way of the Flame will stack with that, and of course with fire damage. Stone Master is just a good, just a solid thing to use this slot for. You get a lot of resolve. You stagger enemies a lot quicker than most of the other stances, so it's great for that. So melee stagger damage. Here, again, it's anything that's close quarters. So every time that you're using your katana to stagger enemies, that's what that's going to apply for. It's not for the bomb pack. So you're using your bomb pack, it's not going to stagger enemies. It's a property, and this took me a while to understand that just because it's on a piece of gear, it doesn't mean that it's affecting that piece of gear. So melee stagger damage, even though it's a little contradictory that you have it on a ranged weapon. Melee stagger damage is not really affecting stagger using the bomb pack, but it is when you use your melee attacks with your katana. Blast radius, self-explanatory. It makes your bombs have a larger radius of influence or effect. Samurai unlock, self-explanatory. Black powder bombs are great for this. Currently, they're also still considered to be a ghost weapon, so ghost weapon damage. I know a lot of you guys are doing curses and doing that curse with the ghost weapons kills, and you have to wait for the cooldowns, which are doubled. This is a great way to get those done quickly. Just use your black powder bombs, whittle a few enemies down, use one or two black powder bombs, and you're done. Let's go to the next one. So ultimate damage. Uh, Again, it only uh, happens when you're only using this property when you're using your ultimate. So Oni damage again, it's damage to Oni foes across the board, and resolve increase is just a good one for this one, especially because I am also running. I'll take a look at the techniques later, but I'm stacking it with something else. You could have health increase. Actually, this is a really good one for samurai because usually for property number one, you can interchange and be a little bit more creative as to what you want to do. Um, as far as your tech slot number one, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Fire damage. This will synergize with the way of the flame that I have here and the black powders because the black powders will catch enemies on fire. So Fire Master here is affecting already two things that I have on my previous um, gear pieces. And then Kunai, so melee damage. One more thing, ultimate damage is also, it counts as melee damage. So it'll stack with this 12% or 11.7. Um, which, one more thing about percentages. I usually try to shoot for as close as possible to full value. Sometimes you don't get as lucky and it takes too long to get a good roll. So if it's within 0.5%, so half of percent point, then I'll keep it. Other than that, I'll just re-roll. That's just personal preference, but just you want to try to work on your roles. And this is something that actually I want to mention because I'm not sure if this is something that's uh, just they've changed since Icky Island, but it seems to me that since that update, it's more difficult to get those perfect rolls. Like previously, it was really simple, but well, not simple, but like way simpler than it is now. The last one that I tried to get took me hours when previously it used to take me 10, 20 minutes tops. Um, but yeah, so there's that. But I feel like it might have to do with the one thing that I've been noticing, which is you're getting a lot of 110 drops now from Nightmare content. It's exclusively you get 110 drops now, which is great. So you'll see a lot of these charms that I'll keep them because they have maxed out properties. So this one has cooldown reduction on kill, which is a good one to have because it's reduces the cooldown of all ghost weapons. So every time you're getting a kill, you're reducing your cooldown. It doesn't seem like much, but with the right build, this could be great. This could be huge. Um, it really just depends, and that's another thing. Don't discard things and don't put things down just because they don't sound like they're powerful enough. With the right build, I feel like most things you can make to be pretty powerful. So this one has maxed out ultimate damage, This one has maxed out melee stagger damage. This one again, ultimate damage. This one came with maxed out rising tempo and explosive blade radius, so that's a pretty good one. So it might have to do a little bit with that, getting a lot of 110 drops that you don't have to modify. They're already 110. You might go with this one. You might have to just re-roll that first slot, but you already got one property and uh, your perk uh, that are pretty good. So you might want to keep them. Before you start dismantling a lot of these, just take a look and you'll see that there's a lot of good stuff that's dropping with maxed out stats. So but yeah, going back to those perfect rolls, it seems to be a little bit more difficult these days. I don't know if it's just my imagination. It could just be me. But anyway, so going back to uh, yeah, so I was talking about the percentages. So yeah, that's what I try to go for. Obviously, it's not for everybody, but before you start um, activating your mastery challenges, and upping your gear to 120, you're going to want to have good percentages, because otherwise that means that you have a piece of gear at 120 that's got horrible stats. So at least I would say at the very least try to stay within two or yeah 2% of the maximum value, because you're gonna want to re-roll those. If you want a good build, you will benefit from having as high a value as possible, and it takes time. But I mean, if you're investing all this time on it, because the grind is really heavy, is really can sometimes be too much on this game, to get your stats, to get all those mastery challenges, to get your cursed gear, to purify, and then to get your second perk to unlock, and then to re-roll those. It could just be overwhelming. So uh, to have to re-roll things on top of that, I would suggest you to start working on your piece of gear to have good stats at high enough values before you start doing mastery challenges to get it to 120. Um, yeah, so then melee damage, again, it stacks. So I'm stacking this melee damage on the kunai, which is again close quarters combat with my katana, stacking it with melee damage on the katana itself, and then ultimate damage will stack with that. So my ultimate's pretty beefed up at this point, especially for Oni, because it's stacking those two melee damage slots and then two Oni damage slots and then one ultimate damage. And if I use Way of the Flame with my ultimate, then that stacks that 25% damage from Master. Um, so yeah, that's something to consider. I started playing with Way of the Flame and ult back in January, and I've been trying to tell everybody that I can um, to use that. If it's probably my favorite thing to have. Before we could have two perks, I used to have Way of the Flame on all my characters, even with the Hunter, because sometimes you're just in a position where you have to use your katana with the hunter, and using it with Way of the Flame does a lot more damage, and you just melt through enemies' defenses, shield enemies, whatever. You break their guard with Way of the Flame, so it's a great thing to have in your katana, and I could not recommend it enough. So here I'm fired up. It's going to synergize with my Fire Master that I have, um, and Ghost Weapon damage here. It will affect my black powder bombs. So I have 20%, almost close to 20% ghost weapon damage. Super massive is great. It'll stop your, it'll throw most of the smaller enemies on their back, and then it'll actually stop uh, bigger enemy foes. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, you can just use Supermassive, and that'll stagger them. It'll stop them for a second, giving you a little bit of breathing room. So that's a great property to have in Kunai. Um, and then again, I got Ghost Weapon damage on the Demon Seeds, which is stacking with the Ghost Weapon damage on these. So it's making both of these weapons 40% more powerful. and then it's making my black powders 40% more powerful as well. So things to consider. Um, Melee stagger damage here, it's again with my katana. Every time that I'm engaging, it's stacking with the melee stagger damage on the bomb pack to make my stagger damage be pretty significant actually for this build. And I can stagger. So if you didn't know, once you stagger an enemy, any subsequent attack will do more damage. Um, so, and it, aside from the benefit of having them vulnerable to and with their guard down to attacks, deep backs is just an absolute must for me with the caltrops or demon seeds. You really benefit from that, especially when you're holding down, be it like a spawn point or a defense area by yourself. It'll buy you a lot of time to have as many of those caltrops affecting enemies around you and just stopping them on their tracks or even just slowing them down. And with the demon seeds applying also weaken to all of them. So weaken, it's again status effect damage, and it will affect how enemies their damage output. So they're 25% less, um, dealing out less damage, and you're actually doing 25% more damage to them. So that's a pretty big thing to consider. Fired up again, it's synergizing with fired up on my Fire Master. So that's uh, that's again, those are things that you want to have to synergize properties and perks on your gear and to make them stack as much as you can so you don't waste any of those valuable slots because one of them can make a big difference if you're not using it right. Now on to techniques. I mean, I don't know why anyone would use anything but Raging Flame at this point. It's a pretty big buff that the Samurai got. I usually like to, well, here I'm playing with Demon Seats a little bit, but I don't have to have two legendaries. I could just as well use my regular Caltrops, and they have the same stats, just a little bit less, 3% less on the melee stagger damage, and 1.3% and 0.1% less than the perfect stats on the demon seats. And one more thing, if you didn't know, all legendaries will always give you maxed out stats. So you're not just getting super lucky with those. I know a lot of people will post excited about not wanting to re-roll them because they might lose their perfect rolls. Legendaries always give you maxed out stats. Um, anyway, so if I wanted to, here is what I was talking about with the interchanging properties. So I could have on my charm, I could have, resolve gain, and then switch this to have that health increase. So which is the same as the as on the charm is 25%. Or I could do deep strikes to stack more melee damage. So if I actually had that, you would see how deep strikes. So that's another 10%. It will stack with melee damage here. So let's just go and look at this. So again, this it's called deep strikes, but it's actually just melee damage. So melee damage plus 10%, and it will stack with the melee damage on the on the katana, and then with the ultimate damage, which is also considered to be melee damage, and melee damage on the kunai. So and again, will stack with Oni damage because that's just any type of damage, and on the katana and on the charm. So that's a good thing to have, or you could switch it out and have health increase, which never hurts for the samurai if you want to have a tankier build. I don't really use Samurai Unleashed, especially with this cooldown. It's crazy low, 36 seconds. You basically have it on demand. Um, what else here? Healing Strike. I love perfect parrying when that makes sense, but I don't use this enough. I mostly played Nightmare content, so I don't have time to be perfect parrying people unless it's perfect parry objectives or any other type of you're I don't know, you're reviving an ally and you're surrounded by enemies, you can perfect parry them, or if you're, yeah, any number of circumstances where you would have to perfect parry. Critical defense, don't really use this. Lightning, lightning reflexes, don't really use that. Uh, yeah, so for this one, all these are viable in my opinion. Not Samurai Unleashed, not that much. And then the Heavenly Strike. I think I played with this maybe a couple times. Some people say that it's not the same as the one on the Stone Striker. Um, it seemed to me like it was the same, but yeah, you can't really. I mean, you why would you do anything but a five strike Hachiman's Fury? That's like the main feature of the samurai. So people go with different things, triple legendaries or whatever, or this 300%, which seems to me like it could. There's a big potential for it to be wasted um, on enemies, but with lower health. But anyway, so that's a look at the samurai, and then let's see for the hunter. Again, as like I said before, um, it's all preference. I mean, I like stone for the samurai just because of the stagger that I have, and stone master will stagger enemies faster. The wind katana I like on the hunter because it gives me the ability to kick people around, and especially if you have wind master, it'll knock them down and leaving them open and vulnerable for that finishing move with the square. So that's just it buys you time if you're overwhelmed or if you just need to get out of a corner or anything like that. It just gives you time. Also to move enemies to a specific in a specific direction, then it helps a lot, which is why I use it. You could of course use water, which is very popular, or moon, which is also very popular with the hunter for that moon master cancel. I just recently started practicing that. I do use dash cancel a lot with all my characters, just because I like the speed of it. But I would love to be proficient in moon master cancel so I could stagger them and whittle them down quicker, which is something that I'm working on currently. But yeah, so again, with the flame, wind master, melee damage. People like to use perfect parry window on the hunter a lot, which is perfectly acceptable. I just don't like using it because I don't. I'm pretty decent at perfect parrying, so I feel like if I start getting used to that with one character, it's gonna mess up my timing with other characters. I'm gonna be used to that parry window, so I just I feel like it's gonna make me worse at it when it took me so long to get decent at it. So that's the reason that I don't use it, but I know some of the best players use it, so it's all preference. Um, let's see. So yeah, ultimate damage. I just prefer that on the hunter. You could of course, just because I'm using my ult a lot with the hunter, so I feel like it warrants that slot. You could also go with ability cooldown or Oni damage, depending on what you're playing again. Range damage, I just like that. Draw speed. I used to do headshot damage plus 10, but it's kind of a little overkill with the ultimate damage, and then all this, because range damage will apply to the ult as well as headshot damage. So it just feels like it doesn't really. You don't need that much ultimate slash ranged slash headshot damage, and I'm doing I'm all the time with the hunter. I'm trying to get headshots, so yeah, draw speed seems to help a little bit with the damage that you do because drawing your bow for longer make it will make the shot more um, do more damage. So that's something to consider as well, and it goes also for body shots. So for me, because of what I was saying, I'm always trying to do headshots. Helmet piercing is what I go with. headshot refund is really, really helpful in not running out of ammo all the time. It will only refund regular arrows, not fire arrows, so that's something to consider. The other possible outcomes are shield piercing, which is also viable. A lot of those enemies have they do that annoying thing with where they hold their shield to their face when you're in smoke. So yeah, I've never really messed with poisoned ammo, throwing shot, sharpshooter, eagle eye, and versatile only when I have another character. So yeah, those are your choices. And let's move on to fire damage. So I like to stack as much fire as I can, just because I try to use my ability a lot. I usually get a lot of fire kills, so that's the reason. So I have fire damage and then fire master. Um, then file arrows is pretty useful because again, weaken, it's a status effect damage. So the weaken will make him 25% less strong or weaker and make you 25% stronger against them. Ability radius is pretty big for me just because like I said, I use my ability a lot. And so that's also fire damage. So my ability basically uh, is benefiting a lot from all this fire damage, which is plus 37%. Um, the sticky, the increased radius is actually something that I forget who turned me on to it, but I think it might have been my friend Olive or someone who's pointing me in the direction of, the top leaderboard players using increased radius for resolve gain, which is great. If you throw that sticky at a big enough um, cluster of enemies, you'll see that the more enemies you hit with it, the more resolve you get. If you get a really good hit with a lot of enemies, it'll fill up almost to resolve. So that's something to consider. Um, Again, fired up, it will be buffed by my fire damage on the charm. So it synergizes and stacks with that. Status effect duration. So this works with the fire damage that I have and with foul arrows. So that's a plus 15% cooldown reduction on kill. There's really nothing else that I would rather have on the sticky for the hunter. Blast radius or ghost weapon damage. I just want to have that sticky as much as I can. But I guess you could do ghost weapon damage, or you could do the other cooldown reduction, which it seems like it would be less because if you're an effective hunter, then you're getting a lot of kills with your ult and otherwise. So you're benefiting from that 4-second reduction every time, as opposed to just a set 15%. And the blast radius you're not really using because it would be kind of a waste. It's not synergizing or stacking with anything else except the sticky itself. Um, so smoke bomb, this is pretty. It's a no-brainer. You want to have as a hunter, you want to have your smoke as much as you possibly can. So you got uh, both cooldown reduction options. The other thing I think it's stealth attack damage, which why would you use that as a hunter? And stealth, which is even I don't think I've ever used that on any character ever. Um, just makes you stealthier. Enemies take longer to detect you. So maybe if you're running assassin in story or something, but yeah. Munitions is a must. Helps you and helps everybody else on the team. Um, Unlucky just because it's great to have to get that instant reset on the smoke. Um, so yeah, that's what I go with the hunter. And that's the way the gear stacks. Now, if we look at my techniques, I love that explosive arrow. A big chunk of my build is dedicated to to the explosive arrow. This guy is great. I just don't see it comparing to this. Um, Executioner is good if you're doing a lot of close headshots. Um, Scent of Blood, I've used it maybe once. It was okay. For me, Hunter Unleashed is huge for the specific purpose of explosive arrows. So I want to get my ability as much as I can, especially on weeks like this week that has incapacitated, which means that your ability cooldowns are increased by 50%. Double legendary will also be viable, maybe on a week without incapacitated. Resupply is garbage tech. Status damage is huge for the hunter. 25% status effect damage. So all the fire or your weaken, if you had poison, anything like that, or I don't know if you can hallucinate with the hunter. Maybe if you had Lady or weaken with Lady Sanjos. But yeah, uh, piercing arrow. Don't. I mean, guess I don't know why you would use that over status effect, except when it's immunity weak, which is really what used to be the only viable option because this resupply is garbage. Um, Killing enemy with an arrow makes you sword attack. Okay, so maybe yeah, you could play with this bow and blade on a week that has immunity. Other than that, piercing arrow seems to be the most, the lesser of all the evils because the choices are not great for this slot. Pinpoint is I used to do that a lot when I was getting used to Hunter and getting headshots. And I've seen people be really proficient with pinpoint, so I'm not going to put it down or say that it's lazy. It's just preference. For me, all-seeing eye works great. Double legendary, I don't see how that would top or anything would make it more worthwhile than all-seeing eye, um, as far as legendaries goes. Burning gaze, this one's fun. I guess yeah, I would play with this just for fun, but also because it would stack with all the damage that I have on this particular build. So yeah, maybe. But all-seeing eye is great, and that's the way those stack. So again, the hunter unleashed and the explosive arrow, they stack and synergize with my fire damage and status effect duration. And then status damage also synergizes with that. So it's just pretty. I mean, hunter is pretty broken, which is why uh, they got nerfed. So for Ronin, I like the Stone Striker. I think it's been established uh, by the top players for some time that's the pretty much. It's basically you're giving your hunter an ultimate sort of because he just heals. I like to play a healing Ronin. Techniques are actually pretty cool for the Ronin now. It's more offense um, since the upgrade. So yeah, the flaming roar is cool. I love the healing pot, so that's what I'm gonna keep going with. Ghost weapons plus 50% is huge for Ronin. Um, the weakening burst, it's pretty garbage in my opinion, and it costs resolve, so even worse. Like ability cooldown, I don't see how that would compare with plus 50% ghost weapon damage. Staggering position is actually cool, and I use that sometimes. And I switch back and forth. Um, I don't know. Oh, I had this for a curse. So if you're doing the curse with the healing, where you have to heal 500, this is a good way to do that curse because it'll increase that. So you just go around and hit a few healing drums and you're done. The cure all is cool. Actually, I played with it a little bit more just to be more, you know, helpful as far as keeping people healed with my healing. It's basically like a remote healing pot for everybody. Um, Resolve increase, that's what I usually go with, or with staggering in position, depending on what I want to do. Usually, if it's immunity, I'll go with staggering in position, or sometimes I just also do it if I want to have, if I want to use my heavenly strike with the staggered, just do that additional damage. I like soothing breath, revive everyone, of course. Fire breath is very popular, and staggering breath is cool as well. If you're doing that curse with the Ronin charm, where you have to kill a bunch of enemies with the ultimate, then this is a good one to have because it actually does damage. So just get something that has ultimate damage, like a katana or something, and whittle enemies down, and then everyone caught in the blast is going to be dead, and you're going to be done with that curse. So yeah, going back to the actual build, melee damage, only damage. I'm throwing my bombs a lot, but I'm also doing a lot of, especially with the bigger enemies that are alive after I empty my clip. I do a lot of melee, close quarters combat, so I like to have that. Um, Way of the Flame, Stone Master, you kind of have to have both of those, in my opinion, for the reasons that I explained before with the Samurai. Blast Radius, of course. Status effect damage, of course, because will um, that will stack with your black powder, and actually your flash bombs, because they actually do a little bit of damage, so it'll stack with that. Um, Melee damage, only damage again, because I'm doing that. What I was saying, I'm trying to get people to, to, or like the bigger foes that are alive. I'm trying to whittle them down or kill them with melee. I'm trying to stagger them as well sometimes, so I'll switch back and forth between status effect damage depending on what it is, or melee stagger damage. I have one bomb pack that has that for the Ronin, so um, this week I'm not doing that, so I actually should go back to resolve increase. So let's see. So again, Oni damage, like I explained before. Resolve increase. So this is good for Ronin, and especially if you have that on your technique, because then you have 5 hits of the Heavenly Strike. So that's pretty much like having a Hatchman's Fury right there in your pocket. Uh, So I do like to use Way of the Flame with them if it's a quick one where I don't have the time to stagger my enemies. But if I can, I'll try to stagger them first and then use the Heavenly Strike, because it does actually a lot more damage that way. Um, and Fire Master, again, well, that stacks with Way of the Flame and Black Powder Bombs and status effect damage. What's cool about the Ronin and the blast radius is that you can, as opposed to the samurai, I guess you could, but I don't, because my build uses a kunai. But if you had a sticky, you could make your bombs have an additional 25% blast radius, which is pretty good, because the more enemies you hit, the bigger the blast radius, the more enemies you hit, and the more resolve you gain, the more damage you do. So that is great for the bombs. I'd go with status effect duration on the sticky, but I could go with, actually, I might switch to ghost weapon damage, because it would make my black powders more powerful, and again the sticky more powerful. But I guess for this I was going with duration, um, just for the sake of letting them burn for a little longer, but it's not absolutely necessary. um, Increased radius makes your sticky 100% bigger, and your fired up will synergize with the Fire Master damage. Um, Smoke Bomb, pretty much the same as a Hunter for the reasons that I explained. My Assassin is he's my main, it's my favorite character, so it's taken me some time to get him to where I want him to be as far as damage output. And I've explained my Assassin build before on previous videos, but just to go over it quickly. Melee damage, again, for the reasons that I mentioned. This one, this is my sort of my main build when I'm not speed running. So status effect damage will synergize with Way of the Flame, and status effect damage on the bomb pack, pretty much for the same reasons as I explained on the Ronin. Um, I used to have 2 things of ultimate damage. I switched to Oni damage just because, um, yeah, just trying something out a little bit more, because I do use my ult a lot. Or I could actually try to go with 2 things of Oni damage on a different charm, because I can re-roll that one. Mm, to be more Oni specific, I do like that the beefed up 20% or 19.4 for the ultimate damage. So yeah, and then I use Masamunes because of the double damage when it procs. Fire Master again, pretty self-explanatory. It'll proc or it'll synergize with status effect damage on both the charm and the bomb pack, and ghost weapon damage will synergize. So this is I actually do have it on the assassin. It's what I was talking about with the Ronin. Will synergize with the bomb pack with the black powders, not the concussions, but the black powders are pretty powerful. And the blast radius for the same reasons, fired up for the same reasons as the Ronin. And munitions are pretty much the same, except for I have stealth attack damage, just because I do like to still play a little bit more like an assassin if I get the chance. Of course, I can't if I really want to get the damage output that I want. I can't be playing like an assassin because the way that Sucker Punch has arranged his abilities and everything else, his techniques, it doesn't allow for you to be fast and powerful. You can be really powerful, but you're slow. So you're sacrificing speed for different types of damage output, which would make you be more like play more like an assassin, which is great. I don't have anything against that, but it's just not giving me the output that I want. Um, the reason that I have Chain Vanish here on the charm is because of the technique. It's great. It'll heal you, I think 70 or 75%. So with two vanishes, you're fully. If you're at low health, you're fully healed. Um, Critical hit plus 30%, and that stacks with the 25 on the smoke bomb. So that's the reason I have that. Um, Experienced assassin, it needs to be baseline in my opinion. The tech could actually be fast critical hits, but light step is garbage. Opportunist is very difficult to line this one up for you to make good use of it. Uh, Deadly Nightshade is great, but uh, it it does mean you have to sacrifice experienced assassin and then have painfully slow assassinations. So I go with the Shadow Storm, 5 hits. Chain Vanish, I already have that on my charm, so don't need three. Uh, and Overshadowed is actually I go back and forth when I'm speed running. Sometimes I want to do just the 3 hits and do more damage, and then maybe do like double, so quadruple damage if Masamune procs um, during that. But yeah, so that's the assassin. Now I think I will go over different properties for different uh, weapons. So one thing that I should have addressed this earlier, but melee resolve gain is not meant to do a lot for you. At full value, I think it saves you 1 or maybe 2 hits with the katana for a full resolve. So I know a lot of people out there love melee resolve gain because they think that it's getting you a lot of resolve. And one thing is a lot of people actually are not using their katana as much as they think. They just think melee any kind of melee damage or gains of resolve or anything else or stagger, it's just you fighting, and it's not. It's specific to when you're using your katana. You're using bombs, you're using your bow or ghost weapons or anything like that. You're not using your melee damage, so you're actually not using that slot effectively unless you are. And I mean, with this last update and the samurai has bombs now, I don't see a lot of people doing a lot of melee combat, so you're really not using that, and that slot is going to waste. So the biggest advice that I have for anyone that's new, do not bother with melee resolve gain because it sounds good in theory, it sounds good on paper, but you're not really using that. Um, Even if you're just exclusively melee fighting everyone, you would not benefit from that very much because it's not meant to do a big difference. Like at most, it saves you 2 hits for a full resolve, and that's out of 18, I believe. So that's that over time. That is a huge waste of a slot. Um, what do we have? Melee stagger damage again. If you're using your katana to stagger enemies a lot, then that's good. Perfect parry is great if you are not feeling too comfortable with the perfect parries yet, and you feel like you need a little bit of help, then this is great. Counter damage is good if you're doing a lot of perfect parrying or a lot of perfect dodges, because when you do that counter strike with either of them, that's where you get that additional damage. Um, let's see what's different here. So ability cooldown reduction, again for weeks like this week where you have incapacitated, so 50% longer cooldowns. This is a good way to counteract that. And if you could stack that with the tech, which all of the characters have, which is the Unleashed version of this ability cooldown reduction. So your ability again is your class ability. The the icon right there at the top. Refreshing Vanish is what I have. Healing Incense, Explosive Arrow, Raging Flame. So um, that's the second slot on the katana. And staggered damage is basically, yeah, any time that you're staggering an enemy. So once the enemy has been staggered, that's where this damage comes into play. So if you're doing, let's say, a Heavenly Strike build where you have um, a lot of stagger damage, and then you're doing your Heavenly Strike exclusively when the enemy is staggered, then you would have an additional 10 to 20% more damage. Um, as far as the perks, Burning Blade basically is like a way of the flame that's not on demand, so you just burn them randomly. Same as Poison Blade, both status effect damage. Intimidating Counter is, yeah, I think I used this once. Not really something that sounds appealing to me. Oh, by the way, if you ever want to look at what anything is, just highlight it with R2. It actually says right there at the bottom of the screen, show details. So R2, and then just highlight it, and it'll tell you what that is. And it goes for properties as well. Tells you exactly what everything is, and the wording is really, really literal. I feel like, in a lot of times, a lot of these instances, you literally have to read it, and it'll be in the way that it's described. So not a lot of room for interpretation, which is great. Um, yep. So oh yeah. So the other possibilities are just switching to the other three stances. Pretty self-explanatory. On the bomb pack, we went over the different things that we had: melee stagger damage, status effect duration or status effect damage, and sorry, the only other outcome is flash bombs, but if you have an assassin, then or you could switch that black powders to flash bombs, which actually flash bombs are great. Um, which I'm really happy that I can do that with the Ronin bomb pack, to have both black powder and flash bombs, because a lot of times, especially with archers, um, you'll notice that they'll want to teleport to the defense area, and if you have a week like this week where we have disciples, then that's a huge problem, because their health will be fully restored by the time you get there. Um, and then you have to kill the disciple, and then you can risk, depending on where the disciple spawns, you could risk losing the defense area. So that's annoying. Um, so flash bombs are a great way to just keep them in place for a few seconds. And if you had status effect duration, then that would mean that they would be frozen for longer. So yeah, that's great. That's a great use of that. Um, yeah, we already went through all of those. Now, Yeah, stealth attack damage for the assassin is good, especially if you're using a lot of, if your build is based around that, then it's great. You can stack up to 75%. You could do that with the charm, with the smoke bomb, and with the blowgun. And then it would go up to 30 if you had critical hit on your techniques. So that could give you up to 110 stealth attack damage. Cooldown reduction, like I said, this uh, is like the other version. I guess that they have both of those versions for all ghost weapons. Either 10% or 2 seconds are the top values. Ghost weapon damage, we've gone over that. What that means, stealth. While in stealth, enemies take longer to detect you, which is not very useful, I think, unless you're doing story and for whatever reason you need that. Toxic Vanish, I've seen it's very popular recently with the Deadly Nightshade. Vanish duration is good for raids, when you have to carry those crystals. If you have group Vanish, that helps a lot. Assassinate from above damage, I don't know why anybody would want to waste a slot on that very circumstantial uh, damage scenario. But yeah. Uh, what else? Okay, so combat regions, actually that was my preferred perk when we could only have one for assassin and when we didn't have refreshing vanish because yeah, it your health regenerates up to 50% while you're not or faster while you're not in combat. Leeching parry, yeah, pretty self-explanatory. I don't use that a lot because I'm not parrying all the time. Health increases can be good. Resolve increase can also be good. It's depending on your build. Super armor is actually great for samurai, I feel like, because if you're like me and you like doing a lot of melee damage, then super armor is just annoying sometimes when enemies can throw you or like interrupt your attacks. Especially those archers love to do that while you're in the middle of fighting an enemy. So that just means you're taking the damage, but you're not getting interrupted. Impactful throws, never use that. Hysteria is great for assassin. I actually have another charm with with both Hysteria and Chain Vanish. It's just fun, and circumstantially can help. Let's see, let's take another charm. So resolve gain, this one is different because this is just resolve gain across the board. So it's actually, if you're going for a resolve gain build, then this would be a more viable option than melee resolve gain because it's just all across the board resolve gain. You can get up to 10% more. Um, Fire damage, pretty self-explanatory. Um, and all these charms have pretty much the same properties. Um, this is meant to be more like a defense charm, so it'll have stats like damage reduction, injured resolve gain, ghost offering health. Sorry. Um, Again, resolve gain and stuff like that. And you'll see that I didn't understand charms very well in the beginning, but so stealth charms are great for certain types of combat. It tells you right there. Improve stealth and assassination prowess. And the ranged is more, for ranged type damage. Utility charm. This one is not very obvious. It's actually a really powerful charm because it's the one charm that'll let you stack ultimate damage and Oni damage on the same charm. So a lot of times charms will let you only choose from one or the other, but this one actually lets you stack both of them. And it only has a few possibilities, which makes it really easy to roll. And what else? Yeah, so all the charms pretty much have the same perks. It's just the properties that change. Melee charm, it's again, it's more focused on melee type damage, so you'll see that the um, probable outcomes are more melee focused, kind of like a katana almost. And then the defense charm is more for your like injured resolve gain and all that stuff. And so it's a more, yeah, it's a more defensive type of fighting that you're doing with this. Um, and then the properties on, let's say the sticky. We've gone over them a little bit, as well as the kunai, um, the way that you can stack things. I don't really use the dirt throw too much, but it's basically you could you could interchange. The cool thing about the dirt throw and the kunai is the cooldown. So this is 30 seconds. This is 40. So you can get them pretty quickly, and they actually have pretty useful stats. I just don't go for dirt throw too much. But yeah, so you could use weaken, and then the other ones are fired up or lucky. The stats are almost the same as I'm pretty sure they're the same as the kunai and your ghost weapon too. So you know the gourd is great for your injured resolve gains and all that. If you're wanting to be more defensive, it works good with the defense charm. And yeah, pretty basic stuff. What else? As far as legendaries goes, I believe there's only a few ones that are worth using. The ones that I'm using for each class are my top choices. Of course, if you're a hunter, this almost no one will debate the fact that skipping stone is the best thing to go with. Um, for the samurai, actually, now I really like playing samurai because I didn't used to be that good. But so for me, it is the forbidden medicine. If I'm running just one, I do like the demon seeds with the double legendary build. For the Ronin, like I said, the Stone Striker is like having an ult because of the Heavenly Strike. So that way you can be healer and you can play defensively at the same time and be effective in both. With the Assassin, it's just because of the ult. I like that Masamunes for the double damage. Um, but yeah, most of them are kind of gimmicky. This Rathus Origami, um, I I do like the Sarogami armor, that perk where you can do the chain of attacks. It's cool. I don't like that it's a water katana. I wish that you could have Stone Master on this, and I think it'd actually be more viable as a katana, and I would have more fun with it. I just don't really use water too much. I got burnt out just from using water so much in the beginning. Um, but yeah, it's a cool thing, but it's like doesn't really unless you're parrying a lot, and you could be. Definitely, there's people that like to parry. It's just not for me too much. Demon Cutter. The the coolest thing about this, in my opinion, is the pop that it does, what that it makes every time you the perk actually procs. It sounds really cool. It's the same pop that you hear when you do Hysteria, when you assassinate someone. Um, yeah, so that one, not really worthwhile in my opinion. Yoshitsune's hand, uh, yeah, 30% chance of causing knockdown. Not really useful in my opinion. The Master's Katana, I think this is like the training wheels for a lot of people coming from campaign to legends, because it's difficult to get used to one stance when you've been playing with all four on the campaign. This I don't really use it because it means that your perk is you're able to switch stances, but if you're doing a lot of nightmare content, then you don't really have the time to be switching from enemy to enemy. So it's actually more effective to just be good at one stance and then use that all the time, and then learn how to deal with the different enemies require a different stance with different tactics, which you could perfect parry, you could shoulder charge, you could kick them,